Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's webinar, where we will be talking about writing and the importance of writing well, writing often, and writing as early as possible in your studies. And I'll take you through some tips and tricks that I've developed over the years of leading various writing workshops at Wits University in Johannesburg, and we'll also be providing you with free access into a course so that you'll be able to get these in your own time and go through that course in a self-paced environment so that you can learn more and really bed those skills and those practices down and get the maximum value from them. So as everybody's coming online this afternoon, let's just get a sense from everybody where you are from. If you could pop a note in the chat and just tell us where you're from. We've usually got Wits University, Pretoria University. I think we've had Nelson Mandela University previously. So it'd be great just to see who we've got online and make sure that we're pitching it at the right level to the right people, and then give us a sense of what it is that you want to learn from the session today. What is it that you're struggling with in your writing? So Cara, great to have you on again. You're a regular attendee of these webinars, so hopefully you're going to get lots of value today. And also good to see Johan. Thanks very much. Leandri, Lee, University of Pretoria. Great to have you guys on board. Really is fantastic to have so much support from you guys. So welcome Lee, welcome Johan, welcome Cara. Fantastic to have you guys on board. Hi from Cape Town, University of okay, so Caroline, you're studying at University of Pretoria. Northwest University, so it looks like we're getting the word out to the different universities. Fantastic, and welcome to the webinar, everybody. It's really great to have you on board this afternoon. And the good news is the weekend is just around the corner. Really great to have you on board. Good afternoon and welcome to the Double Your Writing webinar. And as I think many of you are already doing, please let us know where you're from and what it is that you want to learn today. So we are obviously talking about writing, but is there anything specifically in writing that you've been struggling with? Presumably you've got writing projects. Many of us are writing exams, so let's not forget that writing in how you respond to questions in exams. There's some tips and tricks there that you can put in to improve your answers to exams. And of course, there are larger scale writing projects, reports that you'll need to write as you go through your studies, and then obviously a large scale dissertation or thesis at the end of your study. And really that's going to determine whether you pass or fail. So I think, we start writing very early on in our lives at school, and we develop those principles and practices. And then as we get higher and higher in our studies, it becomes just ever more and more important, and ultimately becomes the single most important thing that determines how well we do and whether we actually pass or fail. Cara is going to begin writing her protocol for a master's in the next 2 months or so, and we appreciate some guidance. Absolutely, Cara, we'll give that to you as well. Hey, from Wits University, fantastic to have you on board as well. So guys, just by way of introduction, I think we've got quite a few people on board, which is absolutely fantastic. I graduated this year with my PhD. Unfortunately, it wasn't a physical graduation at the Great Hall in Wits, but that was at home, and I've spoken about that before, but still very special. And so really what I offer is courses, coaching, and community, and you can catch me on any of those platforms there. And I'll provide links for you guys in the description of this live stream so that you can interact with us there and get some content. Caroline says she's looking to find good flow or formula to write the master's thesis. Is academic, but also good to read and shows my passion for the subject. Okay, Caroline, we'll definitely look at that. Yes, Juwaria, yes, the session will be available afterwards. and all the live streams are available on the YouTube channel. So you can go back in any of them, and it's such a great platform for that purpose. You can go back and you can click in there. You can view all the previous live chats. You can see how people responded to the webinars. You can get all the information that's relevant to that webinar in the description of that video. Obviously, when I provide promotional links to courses, those do expire after a certain period of time. But you can always get in touch with me if you need me to open up a course for you. People who attend my sessions, I will always provide you with the content that you guys can get into to access that as easily as possible. Okay, so guys, we're going to get started. I think we've got a lot of people online already, which is absolutely fantastic. So it looks like this is a key topic that people are sort of needing to get as much help with as far as possible. So we are going to now get started and start really getting into the things that we want to learn today. And I guess just to frame it, we've got to say to ourselves, we go into university, we've got high hopes of changing the world, and doing a doctorate or a master's, or even at an undergraduate level, writing is still incredibly important there. And what really starts to hit home for us is the reality of just how much work that requires, and how much time and effort and energy we have to spend actually writing, and making sure that our complex thoughts and the work that we're doing ultimately does result in this product, this written product, this thesis that we produce. Lee says that she's starting her trials for Masters in Agriculture. What can she do in the meantime as far as writing, since you don't have any results as yet to write up? Okay, well, we're definitely going to look at that in the meantime. And I've got other courses where I talk about overall academic performance and how you should be thinking about your final report, even once you've got your proposal approved. So there are some very specific things that you can do just to keep traction, keep going, and not to spin wheels, while you're waiting for certain deadlines to tick over. So very important that we understand, how writing fits in with what we're doing at university, or at any institution where we're doing studies. And ultimately, it's about thinking. And if you can't express your thoughts clearly in some form of writing, then you don't know that those thoughts are, as clearly described as they need to be for somebody else to consume them. And one of the big things that we talk about is to make sure that there's a strong relationship between writing and thinking. So writing and thinking should almost go hand in hand. And you'll hear me talk a lot about this in terms of writing often. Now, we think all the time. We pretty much should have well-structured thoughts, most of the day. And a lot of that is going to be around our studies. And you'll probably find, if you are studying and you're quite passionate about your topic, and you should be doing a topic that you're passionate about, you'll be thinking about it when you're running, or when you're at the gym, or when you're doing some exercise, or maybe in some other situation, and that your thinking process is going to be generating the whole time. But we never write as much as we think. And what I really want, everyone to sort of reflect on is how much more writing you should be doing to start reflecting the thinking that you've been doing. And if you don't write more, and if you don't write as often as possible, are you missing out on the incredible thoughts that you're having? Because once you've thought them and they've receded back into your memory and other things have taken their place, have you lost that brilliant thinking? And how many times you think, I wish I'd written that down, or what was that fantastic thought that I had the other day? And so whether you're documenting it, and whether you're doing a voice note on your phone, and then converting that into some sort of written material at a later stage, absolutely critical to get your thoughts down on paper as much as possible. And then this art of knowing something. As per this quote, do you really know something if you've only thought about it? Is an idea really valuable to the world until that idea has been put into action, has been put into motion? And in an academic sense, that does require writing. That requires the act of putting sentences and paragraphs and pages together in some sort of output, whether it's a report or an article or a master's protocol, as we've heard today as well. Janelle asks about handwriting. And Janelle, I don't offer courses on handwriting. I wish you could see my handwriting. It's really not very good. So I'm constantly trying to read my own bad handwriting. So if you know of a great course to improve handwriting, I myself would love to do it. I suppose, technology has made us a little bit lazy with the access that we have to devices and how quickly it is just to type off what it is that we need to jot down. But I also do believe, and I teach in my other courses on productivity and getting organized, that you should have a physical notebook, that there should be some physical aspect of how well you get organized. And in the course of keeping that type of notebook, I think handwriting, you're going to keep practicing it, and you're going to keep physically writing with a good old-fashioned pen. That's my pattern, that's my habit. But equally, I don't think that I would be one to learn from about good quality handwriting. That is, so mine is more in the digital format. And ultimately, what is important, I think, guys, is that, and depending on what faculty you're coming in today, and maybe just on the chat, if you could let us know which faculty you're from, because when you look at writing styles across different faculties, so between engineering and humanities, for example, there are different styles of writing, and there are different approaches to how you structure writing projects, whether that's at the level of formatting and the way that you lay out a report, or in a way that you manage references. So I teach on how to do referencing and to bring sources into your writing projects. Humanities, for example, you need to put the surname and the year in when you cite as you write, and that's because it's humanities. You recognize the person that's written that published source that you're now referencing. But in engineering, you typically just put a reference number, and then you have to go to a reference list at the back of the report. And those are two different referencing styles. So the one I think is the Harvard style, and the other one is the IEEE style. So that, the different styles of writing comes through in so many different aspects, not just in the actual sentences and the paragraphs that we write. So we've got humanities today. We've got theology, fantastic. I did a postgraduate diploma in theology at Stellenbosch. So Caroline, interesting to see where you're from. And I think we've got a wide range of different faculties today. And if you were to read each other's reports and read each other's writings, you would see a slight difference in that. But the practicals and the practical principles and techniques that we'll go through today are not going to change between them. All that I'm saying and emphasizing is that just remember who your reader is. Your reader is going to be somebody within that faculty, and they are used to seeing writing from within that field. And make sure that you're writing for that specific reader. Make sure that you're writing to a reader of other humanities journal articles, other humanities conference proceedings, or other humanities theses and reports and dissertations, etc. But good old plain practical, well understood English, if that's the language that you're writing in, and the principles and techniques of how you achieve that is pretty universal. But just to acknowledge that there are some differences between the different faculties. And you can do another of my courses where I go into a lot more detail around how you structure a thesis, and I take you through my own thesis, which is in engineering. So bear in mind that when I show you my experience and background is in engineering, but there is a faculty aspect to writing and structuring writing projects. Blessing from Tux is doing humanities. Thanks, Blessing. Appreciate that. So quite a broad range on our call today. So this is something I put some videos out on YouTube last week, and just to my thoughts, there's really three. When you come to writing and achieving student success, you have to write well. And writing well is what we're going to cover today. I'm going to give you some 4 main practices for writing well. And that's when you have a writing project that you're working on, you have a deadline potentially, you have some structure within which you're doing some writing. And that's really where you need to write well. There's a structured approach and process that you're going through. A supervisor or an examiner is going to give you some feedback. And that's where your writing content needs to be a high level of quality. But as a student and working towards overall student success, you also need to write early. Now, that's not just to say it's early in the day. That could be your pattern. What I'm really talking about here is writing early and consistently throughout your studies. So typically, if you've done a proposal, there'll be a written output for that, and you'll present it, and then you'll get approved. And then we tend to think, well, now you must get into the field and gather your data, and whatever methodology you're following, you will do that. And the writing tends to drop off, and you can now start writing towards your final thesis. And the question on the chat earlier was, well, what would that look like? Well, there's going to be sections of your thesis in your final report, a lot of which you can draw from your proposal. So your introduction, there's going to be a lot of material there that you can, and what I strongly advise to achieve this principle here is open up a document for your thesis straight after your proposal. In fact, take your proposal and just repurpose that for your thesis, and your background and your introduction and maybe some of the key concepts, etc., is going to be very reusable. David says, I keep starting up but not finishing, not following through. Okay, yeah, David. So you should have been in the productivity webinar last week, actually, where we spoke about the I will statements and the burn the boats principle. So there's a couple of approaches there that you can take to getting finished with your writing. But writing early is about getting going with that final report as early as possible, and then putting things like the introductory content and material into the introduction of your final report. Then some of your literature review, hopefully, that you've done for your proposal, you can put that also, some of it, into your final report. Methodology, you can start putting some of that into the methodology section for your final report. Obviously, your results section, which is typically your fourth section of a thesis or a dissertation, that's going to come from your analysis and your results, and then your conclusion and your wrap-up is going to come from your study. You can't write that before you've actually done it. And then, for example, appendices. People often overlook the importance of appendices. So let's say you've had to get ethics clearance because you're doing interviews, you're doing research on humans. Take that ethics clearance certificate and put that in one of your appendices. Take your standard list of questions that you're going to be using in your interviews and put that in an appendix. Use your appendices as a bit of a filing system, because I tell you what, when you get to putting your final report together, you're going to be so stressed, you're not going to be thinking about appendices, and you're not even going to know where you put those things, because it'll be 2 years later. But if you just put them in that document that you set up and you save that safely into the cloud, worst case, anything happens to your PC, you've still got a safe version of it. You know it's already in the final location that you want it to be, which is in the appendix of your final report, and you never have to worry about that ever again. What that does is it starts building up confidence and momentum for your final report as early on in your study as possible. So write well, write early, and then write often. I think what we were talking about just now, we think very often, but we don't write as often as we should. So try and get a bit of a pattern. Set aside 45, 50, 60 minutes, whatever it is, in blocks of time. Potentially you need to take a break and walk around just to get your brain and to get thinking again, but dedicate enough time to writing every day if you possibly can. If you're a part-time student, it might be a little bit trickier. You might rely on the weekends, hashtag PhD weekend. That's a great group to follow on Twitter to get some encouragement if you need to rely on the weekends to get progress and to keep working, etc. Before the lockdowns of 2020, and I would be going into work every day, I'd stop off at a coffee shop and I'd get 45 minutes of writing done. And if you're writing often, then you're building up material. You're continually making progress on all of the different writing projects that you have. And instead of procrastinating, and so David, to your point about starting but not finishing up, maybe you're not writing often enough. Maybe you just feel that when you sit down to try and finish something, you don't have enough written material that you can then work through and edit and put into what looks like then a finished product that you can hand in. So these are 3 key principles. There's a couple of videos on each of those on the YouTube channel, which you can go and check out. Caroline, are there good templates of typically what goes in appendices? So in the course, another course, not the one we're talking about today, I give you my actual thesis, and I will grab that link and I'll pop it onto the chat just now. But one of my external examiner's comments was that I had made very good use of appendices, and maybe just to pause on appendices quickly for Caroline's question, appendices should be something that don't obstruct. You want to put something in appendix that would otherwise obstruct the flow of the rest of your document. So it's not integral to the 5 big sections that you have in your thesis, or the argument that you follow through them. So, an ethics clearance certificate, stick that in an appendix. Your questions that you asked in interviews, stick that in an appendix. For example, I did grounded theory, and I assessed my researcher bias after 14 interviews, and I did 25 in total. And I wrote a discussion paper, and I provided that to my supervisors as an update. And I was able to extract from those discussion papers to go in a couple of appendices. And as I was going through my methodology section, I explained that researcher bias is something you have to factor into. And go and look at Appendix G, because that was a discussion paper I wrote at the time to assess my own researcher bias, for example. So I don't know of any blog articles or resources that specifically focus on what goes into appendices, but I'll certainly provide you with my thesis, and you can also do the course where I go through those appendices and exactly what goes into them. In fact, one of my examiners said that some of my material from my appendices should be brought back into my main document. So there is also a risk that you put things that should go into the main body of your thesis in your appendices, and vice versa. You just have to strike that balance as well. But the point I'm making is, the more that you put into appendices, you keep them in one place. They're already in your final report. If you're just moving them around between the appendices or different sections in the rest of your report, then it's a lot easier than trying to find them all over your PC or wherever you may have created them over the years. Caroline, absolute pleasure. That's what we're here for today. Thank you for your feedback. Okay, so in the course, guys, and what I will take you through now is those 4 practices that are up there on the whiteboard, and I teach an 18-minute overview of them in the course, and you'll get pretty much some of those insights today. Top left, real subjects. We'll talk about that just now. Real actions. These we learned at school most probably, and it's good to just be reminded of them at academic level. We tend to make our writing too complex because now we're at that high level and dealing with the complex topics that we are. Our writing and our sentences then become quite complex, and I'll explain how you unwind your complex sentences and make them a lot more simpler, make them a lot more meaningful, and that's through real subjects and real verbs and actions. And then the 2 on the bottom there of the whiteboard, the principle of old before new and complexity last, is just the order of material in your actual sentences. And what that is about is helping your reader, because there's subconscious effort that your reader is going to have to exert as they read your work. And as much as you can make it easy for them, the easier it's going to be on your reader. And your reader is going to have a more enjoyable experience of reading your work if they don't have to do too much work while they are reading it. And so we'll go through a couple of principles there that will help you with that as far as possible. Okay, so let's get into some of the topics. The first one is real subjects, and you can read the quote there, but to the degree that you make your subjects the main characters in your story, this will mean that your sentences become short and punchy, and therefore your readers will have an easier time getting through your work, and your sentences will just become a lot crisper and more concise. So I've put a link there to my thesis, which you can go grab. It's available on ResearchGate. And to Caroline, go and have a squiz at the appendices there. And so how do you do that? And what are a couple of examples of what that looks like? So let's take these 2 examples that are on the screen there now. And we're essentially talking about exactly the same things in both those sentences. But as we can just intuitively look at them now, we can see that the second sentence is a little bit more dense. It's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit harder for us to really engage with and understand exactly what it means. Whereas the first one is a lot more concise. It gets our attention. It's a little bit easier to read. And the answer is in how the subject has been framed. So in the second sentence, the subject of the sentence, and remember, we always learned the cat sat on the mat. The cat is the subject, the sat is the doing verb word, and the mat is the object. And yet when we get to varsity, we tend to forget this principle, and we come up with a subject like this, which is the stripping of rainforest in the service of short-term economic interests. So that is what's called an abstract subject. It is a continual verb applied to a practical object linked to some impacts on society, and there's too much in that subject. It is technically the subject of the sentence, but before the reader's even able to understand what the subject is, they've got to get through a line and a half of your sentence, which is just too much work for the reader to do. And subconsciously in their mind, you're asking them to exert a lot of effort just to tell them what the subject is. Whereas in the first sentence, they've reframed the sentence. They've just reorganized it a little bit and said, if rainforests, so rainforests is the subject, okay? It's clear. Rainforest is a practical, tangible thing that my mind doesn't have to do too much work to understand very clearly. Rainforest is rainforest. We understand what that is. Then I can go into the detail around, okay, I'm stripping rainforest, it's serving economic interests, and then the object and the rest of the sentence comes after that. So what I'm teaching you guys is to go back to your writing and become your own editor. So once you've written and you're writing early and often, that's good. Don't judge your writing, just get the words down on the page. And even if your writing does come out a little bit complex and it's a little bit more reflective of your ongoing thinking, that's absolutely fine. Don't hinder the speed and constant flow of your writing by trying to make every sentence perfect the first time. What this is doing is then making you the editor rather than your supervisor or your examiner the editor. This is saying to you, what are the tools and tricks you need to go back and think about when you review your own sentences. And you mustn't be precious about your writing. You're going to get, red marks from your supervisors and your examiners if you don't do this. So it's better that you aren't precious about your sentences than they, put red lines through yours. So rather think about this approach of making your subjects practical and clear so that people can read your sentences and do a lot less work in understanding what it is that you're trying to tell them. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And I found that it's a big mistake that I make, particularly in my academic writing. And when I go back through my writing, I'll see, okay, I made that subject too complex. I made that subject difficult to understand. That's not to say that subjects need to be oversimplified. We aren't writing about a cat sat on a mat. We are writing about complex topics. And we don't need to dumb down our sentences, but we can make them a lot more structured. Johan, wow, that's the best. That's the best chat that I've had this whole year. You blew my mind. Okay, well, great, Johan, that's fantastic. So I'll explain later, but I've been teaching this material for the last 5 years in the workshops at WITS, and I go into this in the course in a little bit more detail, but effectively that's the first topic. So we are 24 minutes into the webinar, and it's fantastic that I blew your mind, Johan. You've made my day. So thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback. Okay, and Karen, it's a pleasure for the link to the thesis. I'll go through it there on ResearchGate. And if you guys want to get into any of my other courses, just pop me a note. I'll open it for you and give you that link to get into it. Okay, let's go on to the next one. And this is in a similar light, but starts to help us think about the other important aspect of our sentences. And remember, sentences are the primary, yes, words and letters, but really it's about creating good sentences. Once you're able to create good sentences, those are the smallest sort of building blocks of your writing. You're then going to put sentences together to form paragraphs. Paragraphs are going to form sections, and sections are going to be put together to form your writing projects. If your sentences are weak or too complex, or you're not happy with them, or your supervisor's consistently giving you not great feedback about your sentences, then the rest of your writing is going to struggle. So get your sentences right, and the rest of it should flow a lot easier from there. Cara, yes, it's easy to get carried away with your thoughts when you're so familiar, and it's so important to keep it concise and engage your reader. 100%. It's important to think about your reader while you're writing. So you write the sentence thinking somebody else is going to read the sentence, and they don't have the level of familiarity with me about this topic. They haven't been immersed in the study. They're not as passionate about it as I am, such that I think about it 24 hours a day, or even when I'm at the gym and running, etc. They've picked up my thesis, they've been asked to examine it, and now this writer is making it hard for me to understand what it is that they've done, and I'm just going to have a negative response to the writing. So good point there, Cara. Now let's talk about verbs and how we can fix our verbs. So in the first sentence, the actions are expressed as verbs, and this seems logical because, again, like I said, the cat sat on the mat. Sat is the doing activity of the sentence, and we make it the verb that connects the subject and the object. But what we do typically in academics is we express verbs as nouns. So if you look at that example, the verb or the activity of repeating yourself, or if I have repeated myself, is expressed as a noun, as an abstract noun. So what we do is we nominalize verbs and we convert them into the noun form. So repetition is the nominalization of the verb repeat, or repeated in the past tense. And in fact, in this example, it's been done 3 times for 3 of those verbs. So repetition is the nominalization of repeat. Distrust is the nominalization of don't trust or does not trust, okay? And naming is a nominalization of the verb name, to name something. And what this does is it creates a layer on top of our writing. So we've abstracted away from the physical activity of our subject. So our subject now, we've got that nice and clear and concise. We must make the subject as the actor of the sentence, the doer of the activity, then actually do the thing that is happening in the sentence. And it again is a mistake I've often made, and is a very practical technique that I observe when I go back through my writing, and as my own editor of my writing, something that I can easily fix, because I look and I think to myself, what is the verb? What is the action of this sentence? And where have I obscured that verb from the reader by making it the noun equivalent of that activity? Okay, so that's another one. That's the second key principle that we're learning today. Okay, and then as I said, let's now look at when we sequence material in our sentences. And this principle is called old before new. And as you can read there, paragraphs will flow better when you start sentences with information that is already familiar to the reader. So once again, our tendency as academics and writing in an academic context, and I think Cara put it there very nicely in the chat, is we get carried away with our thoughts. Okay, now what that means is that we want to tell people all about what we're doing, and we bombard them with lots of information. So if you're busy with a study and somebody says to you, a friend or whatever, over coffee, what are you doing? And you bombard them with too much information, and they say, whoa, just break it down for me. And that's fine. It's fantastic to be passionate about your topic. It's absolutely, that's why we're doing what we're doing. But again, think about your reader. And so the principle of old before new is, let's say in now that first sentence of A, the example A there, I've now got a piece of information up front in that sentence. Very important. And we'll talk about in the second one, the next one now, what you should or shouldn't put at the front of sentences. Then we finish off that first sentence with another piece of information. So we've now linked 2 concepts together. And as I said, these are principles across all the faculties, engineering, humanities, whatever. They'll all have their own unique, individual, different concepts and topics and details and facts and all the rest. It doesn't matter what those are. This is a principle that applies to all of them. But when you go back and look at your sentences, the second sentence in A immediately introduces a new piece of information. And by the time you get to the middle of the second sentence in example A, your reader now has to carry 3 pieces of information in their subconscious mind. Instead of, in example B, you pick up where you left off at the end of the first sentence. And the tendency is now we think, okay, well, I've done with those 2 concepts, and then I go into the second sentence, and I'm now, wanting to get all these concepts across to my reader. Just slow down a little bit and reinforce that old concept at the beginning of the second sentence. And you'll find again in your writing, when you go through this, you do this just automatically, because it's the same mindset of being passionate and trying to get the concepts out. Just swap the order around in your second sentence so that you reinforce the old concept before you introduce the new concept. Now, it may not work all the time, and it's not something you must do rigidly or mechanically. It's a technique that will improve your writing, where you maybe have a paragraph or a couple of sentences that you've maybe had some feedback on that it doesn't make sense or it doesn't flow nicely. I think we had a Mama Tabile said, how do I keep the flow in writing my master's thesis? So flow is all about continuity. So I can flow from one thing to the next if you give me a bridge, if you give me some stepping stones to go from one thing to the next. Now, in my courses, I teach about how you do that between sections. So between your introduction and your literature review, between your literature review and your methodology, between your methodology, there's bridges that you create between these sections. And that's flow in your overall document. This is flow between sentences, and you create flow by linking concepts together, but actually putting them next to each other from the end of one sentence to the beginning of the next sentence. And then, by all means, introduce this final important piece of information marked there by red at the end of that second sentence, okay? And that's then that last piece of information. And arguably, that's maybe the thing that you need to build up to. But you're building it up with respect to the reader and taking them on the journey and giving them the stepping stones to go from one piece of information to the next. And you're saying, okay, in the first sentence, I've given you 2 pieces of information. I'm just going to remind you of that last one before we get into the third key information. And the reader has got time, actual time, for their subconscious mind to catch up with the concepts that you're giving them before you give them that last third piece of information. Now, this may not seem significant for 2 sentences, but in a thesis of 40,000 words and a couple of 100 pages, if you're consistently doing this, your reader's going to be exhausted and they are going to feel bombarded with all of this information. And that's how the subconscious mind works. It's the little pieces that add up to an overall sense of either exhaustion or a high level of engagement with the writing. Aretha, good to have you on board. I see your comment about being here from Wits Humanities. You're also a regular and very active in our Facebook group. So just a reminder, guys, please join our Facebook group if you want to get updates on these sessions and interact with the rest of us. We absolutely have a vibrant group there on Facebook. It's members only, and I moderate. So it'll be very much geared towards student success, and I think lots of people get value from being in the Facebook group. And of course, you're on YouTube at the moment, so just hit that subscribe button there, click the bell to get the notifications, and then you can get daily tips and tricks with the videos that I put out there on the channel. Right, and then the fourth and last sort of practical concept that I want you to take advantage of from the session, in which I go into a lot more detail in the course, is this idea of complexity last. And it's kind of linked to the previous one, where if you remember that red block, if that was the most sort of complex thing that you wanted to get across, again, and reinforcing the previous technique, put that towards the end. Now, just don't overdo it. Don't put it right at the end of a paragraph. Remember, a paragraph needs to be a self-contained set of thoughts, and you need to also summarize your paragraph with a sentence or 2. But complexity last means put complexity towards the end. Build up in terms of the level of thinking that somebody has to do to grasp the concepts that you're giving them. And it's fairly logical. We've had a lot of time, because of all the effort that we put into our studies, to get to grips with these things. So what Cara said, we get carried along with all these concepts, and we're already familiar with them. And one of the key things that you need to do in your thesis is to define and explain key concepts and topics that you repeat often. You should have a section somewhere that you define those up front. But when you are now maybe introducing new terms, and maybe you've developed a theoretical framework and you're now wanting to present that, you're going to be excited about that because you've reached a breakthrough. Maybe, after long, hard years of study and research, you now have this unique idea, or there's some insight that you've got from the data, and you're so excited about it. You sit down to write, and that's the first thing that you put in your sentences, or the first thing you put in your paragraph. You went to get to that. Once again, just spend the time in your writing, in the sentences, to build up to those concepts. Don't put it at the end. And I always say, writing academically is not a murder mystery. In your abstract, right at the beginning, you need to tell your reader what the answer is. What is the finding that you achieved in your research? And then the rest of it is the detail. But in terms of helping a reader find their way through your writing, if you keep coming at them with complex topics without a chance to build up to them, then your readers are going to be exhausted, and they're not going to have that level of satisfaction of understanding that concept by working through your material in a systematic, logical format that builds up from the concepts that they understand and the bridges that you create from the knowledge that you've established. Remember that you start with an introduction. You bring the reader into your world. So you have to create the context of what the real world and how it relates to your topic. And then from that introduction, you're going into the detail of your study. All right. So those are the four principles that I wanted to teach today in the webinar. And hopefully, which, if they are useful for you, and one of them blew Johan's mind, which is fantastic. It's, when you think about it, it's logical, but when you need to be reminded of it and you think, wow, yes, that's it. I just needed to be told that today for my studies, then it can have the power, as it did for Johan, to blow your mind, which is great. So that's fantastic. What I've put here is just 3 books that I personally have read and found extremely useful. So Craft of Research, I would focus on the second half if you do pick it up. The first half is a little bit more complicated, but the second half is very helpful in terms of putting your reports and structuring your writing, etc. And I think there are prior versions of that are open source. So even you don't need to pick up the latest version. The previous editions are already available. The authors have distributed those PDFs, so it's quite easy to go find it on the internet. The middle one is very new, so you will have to buy that. I think it's on Kindle or Amazon, and it's not too expensive. But what Inga Mewburn does, and she runs the Thesis Whisperer and the #PhD Weekend group, she, as an examiner herself, she presents the book from the point of view of an examiner and says, okay, these are the typical comments, that we see and that we have to give our students, and then they work backwards from those comments. And they fix the trouble with your academic writing. But it's very good to say, well, if I'm going into a writing project, and I'm likely to get these issues coming through from my examiners, what are those things that I can then work to avoid before I actually get there? And then James Hayton, he writes more broadly about, the life of a postgraduate student. It's very humorous. He nearly dropped out. He talks about his experiences of, getting more focused and getting his PhD finished. He's a nuclear physicist, I think, but now he actually does coaching as well. If you want coaching from him, I think he charges a couple of £100 for coaching. And today you're getting some coaching for free. But you're more than welcome to hop on his website and read his book. It's very good, I must say. It's very humorous. And he's got a great blog, so you guys can go and search out those resources as well on the internet. So I thought I'd just share a couple of books that I've found useful for you to have a look at and to do some research on yourself. And so the course that I'm going to provide you with today, and I think many of you have done it. I know Aretha, I know you've done it. I'm just looking at some of the other people that we've got online today. I do recognize 1 or 2 of your names, and I've seen you in the course, and I am very active in all my courses. So if you've got questions, there's assignments, there's quizzes, we interact. It's the online learning experience is extremely interactive, and good instructors will be engaging with their students. So don't think that it's material that you just go and consume and that you've been left to your own devices. It is as interactive as we are now, almost. So please, dive in there, take advantage of it. I'll show you just now exactly what you get in each of the sections. There's a bit of a subtitle to what you'll achieve with the course. And we've had quite a few people go through it. And as I said earlier, and to those of you at other universities, this material was developed around over 5 years. So I ran workshops for students, postgraduate students at WITS, and so I refined the material. Every workshop that I ran based on questions, what was useful, what wasn't useful, etc. And I think maybe we even have a couple on the call today that have been in some of those sessions, and those were really the foundational testing of this material and the value of it. And as you can see there, some said these workshops should be compulsory, because you're not going to get this training. A lecturer is going to be teaching you about the content that he's doing as research and that the university has hired him as an expert in. You need the coaching and the writing skills to be successful as a student. So yeah, helpful tips and tricks, improved sentence construction. These are all the things that people observed in the workshop over the years at WITS University. And what you'll learn listed up there, we've gone through a couple of these. Bottom left there, nominalizing actions, that clutters your sentences with unnecessary words. You remember when we went through that, particularly the one with the complex subject, how long that subject was and how many words that was. And when you nominalize actions, you also add words into your sentence. So what you'll find is when you reduce the nominalized version of the action down to the single individual verb, you actually get rid of a couple of other words in your sentence. And you must aim for concise, clear, meaningful sentences. That's just basic, but not the simplified, dumbed down, the cat sat on the mat. That's not what we're aiming for. We are in academic postgraduate level. You're going to have to write on complex topics, but there's no excuse for overdoing, making it unnecessarily complex. And then, as you see, there are a couple of other things that we've gone through today. So when you go into the course, there's 4 sections. It's an hour. Go through it an hour. There's a lot of other material than what we've gone through today. I go through principles. So I touched on those just now, the relationship between writing and thinking, and then when to write, the golden thread principle, principles of drafting a research report. So I think there was a question earlier about the principles of how do you write a research report. So go through and have a look at that video. How to overcome writer's block. And then also abstract patterns. I spoke about the abstract just now, and that a research report is not a murder mystery. You know exactly what the answer is, and when on the academic databases, your abstract with the title will always be available to someone searching an academic database. They won't have to go into your report to get the answer. They'll only go into your report if they want to get more detail about the answer or to see how you got to the answer. So we talk about abstracts in the course as well. And then some of the practices, old before new, nominalization, etc. These are all the things that we've gone through today and that are then available for you either in the recording of this live stream if you don't want to go into the course, or in the course which I'll provide to you for free now. And once you've enrolled, you'll always have access to that. And then there's a bit of conclusion there where I talk about the student success coach and the value that you can get there. And then just some of the comments that I've had in the last month or so. And yeah, a lot of people, the comment that I get back is, I wish I had this previously. But at least now in general emails, this person found it useful in the emails that she writes and the general business communication and other types of emails that she has to write. She finds those principles extremely useful and manages to write very clearly and precisely, which is fantastic. And then there's a point there around how writing is a form of communication that is not always face-to-face, and so it's got to be clear and simple as far as possible. And then using words in a suitable manner also important. Great course. There, thanks for time and effort. Absolute pleasure. I do this because I benefited from these books and other people. I never really found this type of course when I was looking for it. So I've aimed to create courses on all the other topics as well that I wish I'd had. I think to myself, what did I wish I had when I was doing my master's or my PhD, that if I could go into it, it would have helped me if I needed it back then. And although I've done my PhD and my master's, I'm 100% focused on helping other people at those levels to be successful. So personally love the course, would love to take more. There is lots more. You're more than welcome to go and do those courses. If you need to get into a course, pop me a message. Best place is to get me on Facebook and I'll open it up for you. I do just want to mention that there is a much more comprehensive writing course, which does include some of these concepts on the EdX platform. And I co-instruct that course with Professor Terry Carmichael and Professor Nomusa Mazonde. Now, that is going to take you a lot longer. It's going to be 2 weeks or so of about 2 to 3 hours per week. It's completely free. But if you want the certificate and you want to get access to that material after you've completed the course, you do need to pay $49. So edX is a not-for-profit learning platform, and you're more than welcome. Just go search edX, WitsX. You go find it's very easy. You're more than welcome to go through. You'll see the videos there. Myself, Nomusa, Terry, we had a lot of fun putting that course together. But as I say, it's a lot more extensive. There's a lot more assignments. There's graded quizzes. And if you want that much more detailed explanation of writing and so on, you're more than welcome to go and do that course. All right. So what I would really love is just some feedback in the chat, and just give me an idea of whether today has been useful for you guys and what it is that you got the most value from. And what I'm going to do now is just to make sure that you've got the link that you need to the course, so that you can go in and you can do it and get access to it and get the value that I promised to you today, which I think is something that a lot of people have asked me to provide, and which I hopefully now have done with these courses, and which I'm going to make available to you right here. So let me do that now quickly. But in the meantime, if you guys can just pop a note on the chat and tell us what was valuable for that. David has asked for the books again. So let me just quickly go back to the books. So I'll pop the books up there, and best is just take a quick picture or a screenshot of the books. Those are the books there. And then what I'm also going to do is just provide you with the link to get the group and the videos. So there you can subscribe for regular videos on the YouTube channel. And then the other one, very important, is to please join us in the members only exclusive Facebook group. Also providing that information there for you. Hopefully that's going to come through. So come and join us in the Student Success Coach members only Facebook group, and that's probably the best place to get hold of me as well. I do actually provide individual coaching. I can help you with a 30-minute call, and we can just identify where your challenges are, and that's free. I don't charge for that. You're more than welcome to drop me a note, and I've had a couple of people get in touch with me and take me up on that, because your situation is going to be unique. You're going to have specific issues. Maybe I'm not able to cover all the different scenarios that people have in these webinars, but by all means, give me a call. We'll hook up on Zoom or Facebook or WhatsApp. It doesn't matter where, but let's have a 30-minute chat, a 30-minute coaching call, and I can maybe help you and point you in the right direction. And we can by all means do 1 or 2 follow-ups thereafter. I don't have a fully fledged in-person coaching offering. As I said, James Hayton does. You can go and check him out, but you are going to pay, as I said, 100, 200 pounds, I think, for an hour of coaching with James Hayton. If that's something that you can afford with me, I will offer you 30 minutes free coaching call. And of course, join these webinars every Friday. Hopefully you'll get lots of value from them. And the next two that's coming up is next week. Dr. Jeff, if you've been in the Facebook group, you'll see that that he's just finished his second PhD, which is an amazing feat. So I'll be interviewing Dr. Jeff, and he is at the Gibbs Business School here in Johannesburg. He's a lecturer. He's a sought-after international speaker on innovation, and he runs an MBA cohort. And I've lectured in his class. We've collaborated on papers before, and he's just an amazingly nice guy. So join us next week at 12 o'clock. Hopefully these are useful. You have to have lunch anyway, so have lunch and join us on these sessions. And then the last webinar of the year on the 27th of Friday, there's a jobs platform that has been launched in South Africa. So I think it is only in a South African context, but the gig economy means that we can all now do micro little jobs, an hour here, an hour there, half an hour, whatever. And this platform connects corporate clients with students like yourself who maybe want to do this gig work. And so I'll be talking to Bubu Bana, the founder and CEO of Jobbox. So that's 2 weeks from now. So the links and all of that are in the YouTube channel. And they're also in the, I'll add them into the description of this live stream, but you'll certainly find those videos if you go and have a squiz around on the YouTube channel. And in the Facebook group, which, as I say, is the best place to come and join the community, I create all of these as events there. So you'll get a notification pop up and the link is there, and you can just pop on quite easily from Facebook there. Okay, so I just want to say thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. I think we had a very good attendance today, and it looks like we've got some value that you will have achieved. And I hope that you got the link. Let me see, I did put the link on there. So just go through the chat and you'll pick up the link. And that is open now. But as I say, it will expire in a few days. So go in there, enroll, and you've got the material open to yourself. And then also what's great is I continually add lessons and content to all my courses. So if you switch on your email notifications in Udemy, then you'll get notifications, and I'll make an announcement into the course when there's new material, new lectures, etc. And you'll be able to get that benefit of those updates, once you've enrolled, and if you switch on your notifications. Cara, yes, absolutely. Broadening workshops. We are going out to all the universities. We potentially advertising across about 26 different universities, because it just absolutely feels like people do need this type of content. And I've got the podcasts kicking off next year. We'll be running these webinars hopefully quite regularly. I think the Friday 12 o'clock slot works well. So yes, most definitely, Cara, we're getting the word out. And Cara, if I could ask you, why don't you hop on in the Facebook group, and maybe let's just have a post there, a bit of a discussion about how we can get the word out to other universities, because it's absolutely free. I promote my courses, but I provide free access into them, and really just all 100% focused on ensuring your student success. Guys, so we're going to leave it there. Have an absolutely fantastic weekend, and I look forward to seeing you in the Facebook group. Come and engage in there, give some feedback, tell us what you're struggling with, ask us for specific questions, and if you need a 30-minute call with myself, please do let me know about that inside the Facebook group. So we're going to say goodbye, and thanks everybody for joining us, and have a good weekend ahead.